Number 3. Track A and B. Mistakes and blunders. A hacker looks at cryptography.
Actually, it's probably more accurately the views of hacking from a cryptographer's perspective. One of the reasons I like this conference a lot is that there are many speakers here with a completely orthogonal skill set to mine. And I can come and look at the same problems from a cryptographic, which is really more mathematical and rigorous view, and talk to people who are out there actually doing things, might not even really knowing why or how, but making things work. And the font isn't great. I have no idea why, but it's Microsoft PowerPoint. I'm afraid to touch it. So please use your book. What I'm going to talk about is sort of the distilled experience of doing product analyses. One of the things we do is look at products that use cryptography, look at security products, trying to figure out whether they're any good, if they're bad, where they're bad, and why they're bad. And I'm going to give, this isn't a 12-step program. This might be a top 20 list of stupid security tricks. Things I see in products over and over again. So, way of introduction, cryptography is really important. I don't know if I have to say that here, but why it's important is worth looking at for a second. It's important because it allows us to take existing business and social constructs from the world of face-to-face into the world of computers. So notions of privacy, authentication, signatures, integrity, fairness, anonymity, none of these are new ideas. There's nothing new here. We're just trying to take these existing ideas and put them on the internet, on computer networks. And that's really neat, because what that means is we can transform the internet from an academic toy into a real live business tool. We can do actual commerce, we can get actual spam. All of these exciting things we've done in the real world, we can do on computers. So cryptography does that. That's the promise. Unfortunately, most products out there don't perform as advertised. And this is one of the great, problems of security on the net. That it doesn't actually work as we want it to. And I'm going to talk about why. So, sort of basic outline. What we're trying to do, why we're trying to use cryptography, whether we can do it. No. Jet.
So it's the fire department, and apparently the hotel can't control the fire department. So all I got was, the fire department will test whenever they feel like it randomly throughout the day. Sorry. I know. I know, I have my corruption unit working on it right now.
Well, hopefully we'll get a discount. Well, let's see how much of this we can get through. First thing to look at. This title of this slide is from Russ Anderson. I think it's a really nice way of looking at the system. Security is different than any other sort of engineering. Fundamentally, security engineering is different. Normal engineering is based on functionality. And if you think of the original cool hacks, you took this and this and this and put it together and did these things and it worked. Isn't that neat? And that's functionality. That's what most engineering, most programming is about. Security products aren't about that. Security products are useful not because of what they do, but because of what they make sure doesn't happen. Because of what they don't allow to be done. So while and this is worse than people's cell phones, which is what normally happens. So normal security engineering is about figuring out how things will fail and then making sure they don't happen. Right? It's somewhat similar to safety engineering. which is also has nothing to do with functionality. But safety engineering involves making sure things work in the presence of random faults. So the notion of programming Murphy's computer. Security engineering involves making sure things don't fail in the presence of a malicious adversary who's going to do just the wrong things at just the wrong times. So I like to call it programming Satan's computer. And that's the environment we need to make sure our security products work in. And testing this is very difficult because security is orthogonal to functionality. If you're going to building a word processor or want to know if it printed, you can plug a printer in, push the print button, and see if it prints. And then you know if the print function works. You're building an encryption product, you can see, does it encrypt, does it decrypt? You have no clue whether it's secure. Right? Beta testing can never uncover a security flaw. You need real experienced people looking at security. Right? Beta testing is the 1,000 monkeys, I guess the million monkeys idea. We get enough people pounding on it, we'll see all the different types of functionality. But that doesn't work for security. And what's interesting is that people ship security products without testing security. Now, you can imagine a company that does no beta testing. They have engineers, they write code, and when it compiles, they ship. There's no in-house testing, there's no beta testing. Right? The odds of that product not having any functional bugs are basically zero. So similarly, you can take a security product and do no security testing, whether in-house or outside. The odds of that product not having any security bugs are just as small, which is why we're seeing lots of security problems. So how to test? It's a tough question. But experienced testing can discover security flaws, but we were learning again and again that it's not easy. Right? Security is a chain, and the weakest link will break it. And security problems can be anywhere in the chain, in the design of the product, the implementations, the configurations, the algorithms, the protocols, the user interface. You could have code that's very far removed from the security code actually break security. I've seen products where the windows for the dialog boxes will break the security. Kind of surprising, but that kind of thing happens. And there's really no comprehensive security checklist. Right? There is a list you can go through. It doesn't have this problem, but you don't know that it's complete. And in fact, you know that it's not complete. So now the top 20 list. Why do things fail? There are a lot of reasons. I'm constantly surprised and amazed by the new clever ways systems are broken. But there are a lot of common blunders. And they've been common for the past 20, 10, the whole bunch of years. So this is not an exhaustive list, but this is the common list. And I'm trying to do this from the inside out. I'll talk about the math first and then go out to the whole products. So the first problem, which I see a lot of, is products that use proprietary algorithms. And these are algorithms that are designed by someone in the company and used in the product. This is just plain silly. There's absolutely no reason in the world to do this. On the one hand, designing algorithms is extremely difficult. And we learn this because most algorithms that are published, that are designed by reputable cryptographers who have experience, end up having flaws. So even people who are good at this have trouble doing this. So someone who is not good at this, the odds of them being able to do this properly are very small. And you could look at the AES submissions. AES is the replacement for DES. Currently, NIST is choosing a DES replacement. There were 15 submissions. The top 5, what I believe NIST will pick for the top 5, and this is probably true, certainly the leading candidates are all designed by people who have lots of experience analyzing and breaking ciphers. Those that are designed by people who had no experience had many more problems. And some of them were obvious security problems, some of them were subtle, some of them were performance problems. Basically, if you're not good at this, don't do this. So why might you want to do this? You might want to do this because you think there's a benefit. And there actually isn't. There are free cryptographic algorithms out there for pretty much everything. So there's no real business case to do this. So given that it's hard to do, and given that there are free alternatives, it consistently amazes me that again and again we have companies coming out with proprietary algorithms. And this is my first warning sign. Right? There's no substitute for peer review, for years and years of peer review. And there's no reason really ever for a proprietary algorithm. Right? The cell phone industry is the latest industry that's being really annoying about this. They have proprietary algorithms that get broken regularly, and they just haven't seemed to learn yet, although they might. Similarly, we can look at protocols. My protocols are going to be the messages going back and forth between two parties to establish some kind of security model. And similarly, designing protocols is very, very hard. Right? Lots of published protocols end up being broken. There are a bunch of tricks that people who design these protocols regularly use, and you'll see them in some of the better protocols that are out there. But this is hard to do, and again, we find many companies prefer to roll their own rather than to use published or at least open alternatives. And what we're learning, of the past few years, there have been a number of internet protocols that have gone through different types of processes in an effort to be standard. And we have some idea of what works and what doesn't. The design process of propose something, analyze it, fix it, repeat, seems to work pretty well. And it's something we've seen done with IPsec, which has been many, many years.
The alarm you hear will be part of this test. We apologize for any inconvenience.
I think.
May I have your attention, please? We are conducting a test of the hotel fire safety system. The alarm you hear is part of this test. We apologize for any inconvenience.
So I think I have 15 seconds to speak before they start making the noise. So comparing IPsec, which is a publicly designed protocol, which has its problems, has sort of its many, many crooks. For the moment, okay. So I'm comparing IPsec, which is a publicly designed protocol with quite a lot of peer review and quite a lot of academic brains behind it, to something like PPTP, which was a Microsoft proprietary protocol, which Mudge and I looked at last year, found it extremely lousy. I called it kindergarten cryptography, and that was being kind. And since then, they've tried to patch it, and Mudge and I have a revised paper we released, I believe today, which looks at it and finds still more problems, although they seem to have fixed the more egregious problems. You know, still, this cycle is really wanting compared to something like IPsec, or compared to something like SSL, which was done by Netscape, but in an open process, where we can all examine it and try to fix it, and the TLS process, which will be sort of SSL2, I guess SSL4. There's a lot of benefit for doing this open. Another problem I see a lot of are bad random numbers. And this is a big deal. A lot of people don't talk about this. Most of the cryptographic systems we use require random numbers to work properly. If the random number generator is bad, the product is insecure. We use them for generating session keys, for seeds, for generating public keys, random nonces for digital signatures, random nonces for protocols. If you remember the... oh, come now. Back against Netscape a few years ago by the Ian Goldberg, David Wagner, someone else, the grad students at Berkeley. They attacked the random number generator. So an insecure random number generator will compromise the security of the entire product. And there are quite a lot of bad ones out there. We at Counterpaint have done some work on this. We have a couple of papers on breaking random number generators and how you can do that and what that means. And we also have a free random number generator on our website that we urge companies to use because there really isn't anything else good. So more generally, I want to talk about what I call the cult of mathematics. And we see this in different products that will say things like, we use triple DES, therefore we're secure. Or, we have a 1,000-bit key length, therefore we're more secure than someone with a 500-bit key length. Mathematics is important, and cryptography, the math of cryptography, is necessary for security, but it's by no means sufficient. And I see lots of products that will spend all their time on the crypto, 16,000-bit keys or other oddities you see. And I like to think of it as putting a huge stake in the ground and hoping the enemy runs right into it. There are lots of ways to break security products that go around the cryptography or abuse the cryptography. Even with something like DES with a 56-bit key length, which we know is brute force breakable, there are often much faster ways to the plain text than brute forcing the key. And we're going to talk about some of them. Also, proofs, a lot of systems talk about provably secure. We're provably secure. Now, this is interesting, but also not that important, because proofs of security are often very limited. They assume two things, a set of assumptions and a logical proof. So the proof of security is fine, the logic is usually good, and then you look at what are the assumptions. Under these sorts of assumptions, the system is secure. Usually the way to break those systems is try to change some of the assumptions. Now, proofs are nice because I can often reduce the security of one part to the security of another part. So things like HMAC, which is a standard internet MAC function, is as provably secure as the underlying hash function. As a designer, I like that because it reduces the number of links in my chain. But people who do one-time pads are often guilty of this. One-time pad is provably secure. Well, that's true. That doesn't mean a product that uses a one-time pad is secure. Or IBM, a couple of years ago, came out with their new provably secure signature system, which was going to revolutionize internet security. It actually hasn't yet, and the reason is, the proof, while interesting, is not the same as having a secure protocol. So more generally, and this is where the expertise of everyone else here is better than mine, right? Looking at the insecure software, computers, and network. It's sort of odd to try to build a secure system on top of a Windows NT, an insecure operating system. And yet we often try to do that. And there are lots of problems in building secure software. We actually don't know how to do it. We don't know how to build software that we know is secure. Also, we're finding the same mistakes over and over again. Overflow bugs were identified, in the 70s? And still, many cert advisories are based on overflow bugs. You think we can't even get the easy stuff right. The more subtle stuff is probably beyond us right now. And yet, this is what we're trying to do. Some of the better products will take trusted kernels and build on top of that. Certainly better. Often, it's impossible to build a secure system on a computer platform because you have no control over the platform. So you look at something like PGP, which is a great product and is very secure in its environment, but things like a stealth keyboard reader or a Trojan horse or a virus can break the security of that product, not because the product's bad, but because there are more ways to the data than through the product. So a stealth keyboard recorder that will simply record the passphrase, right? There's no way PGP could stop that. That's beyond what's possible for the application to secure, but that's a way to attack the product in certain environments. So really an insecure computer or a network can undermine the security of everything that's above it. And this is important, because when I'm looking at the security of products, I'm taking a much more holistic view. I'm likely to not attack the product in the way you want me to. A nice thing about attackers is we can cheat. We don't have to follow the rules that the defenders want us to follow. I'll talk a little bit about secure perimeters. Many systems, mostly commerce systems, mostly commerce systems, use the notion of a secure perimeter. And the definition of a secure perimeter is a tamper-proof enclosure that you can't get inside. So it could be a dongle, it could be a smart card, it could be a secure box with an alarm on it, it could be VeriSign's root key in a secure vault with, I don't know, liquid argon atmosphere, whatever they're doing there. Yeah. There are different notions of secure perimeters. And these are actually very difficult to do. There really is no such thing as tamper-proof hardware. Really, the ease of attacking this stuff is based on who the target is, who the attacker is, what the funding is, what the time is. You know, the good Vegas analogy is a slot machine. One of those slot machines is effectively a secure perimeter. If you could get inside the slot machine, you could make a lot of money, because there's a lot of money in there, and it falls out of the hopper pretty regularly. But if you go out to the casino floor, there are people, there are lights, there are guards, there are cameras. If you get anywhere near a slot machine with a drill, they're going to throw you out of this casino really fast. But if the Venetian said, well, here's a slot machine, go take it home. Play with it for a month or two. Bring it back, and whatever on the pay line, we'll pay you. It's okay, we trust you, it's tamper-proof. And that's suddenly a very different value proposition for an attacker. Because someone who's good at whatever type of tamper resistance breaking you need to open one of these, can take it into his basement, can x-ray it, can examine it, can buy 3 or 4 others from IGT, whatever company makes those machines, take them apart, analyze them, and take a couple of months trying to break this slot machine. So it's very different. Really, if you think of like the Mondex smart card, that's effectively a trusted agent of Mondex sitting in your wallet. And that can be very dangerous. So I like tamper resistance. I like secure perimeters. I think they're a good idea as an additional measure. But the first bullet, I think, is true, that any system where the device is owned by one person and the secrets inside the device are owned by another is fundamentally a flawed system. And whereas tamper resistance is a good barrier to entry, it is not an absolute security measure. And there have been any number of papers looking at failures of tamper resistance. Marcus Kuhn in Cambridge is really good at this. Talk a bit about key escrow. Key escrow is tough. It's very hard to design key escrow systems in such a way that they don't introduce new vulnerabilities. And a little bit about the terrain. We get a lot of new names for key escrow, data backup, data recovery, key recovery, lawful access to plain text. I mean, there's lots of different names. But basically, it's the same idea. The idea is that some third party can get access to the secrets in some form without the consent of the conversants. Now, in some ways this is a good idea, right? Data backup is essential. When you put data in storage, that data has value. When you encrypt the data in storage, suddenly the key used to encrypt that data now has the value of the data. Right? If your accounts receivable file is encrypted and you lose the key, that's bad. So data backup is essential, and some kind of recovery from encryption is essential for data in storage. Data in communication, on the other hand, has no value. If I send you an email and it's encrypted and you lose the key, I can send it again. If we have a conversation, a telephone conversation that's being secured using a key, and one of the machines loses the key, you hang up and then reestablish communications. Right? The difference is that for data, you really can't go backwards in time and reestablish. So this is important when looking at key escrow systems. A lot of the needs of corporate data backup are not the same as what the FBI claims that they need. Things like 24-hour, real-time surreptitious access is not something the average corporation needs if it loses the key to its accounts receivable file. And a lot of what the government seems to want actually will reduce the security of your system. Given how hard it is to build these systems, the only thing we have going for us is simplicity. So you might think of a secure telephone, the Stu 3 or the AT&T TSD or the Clamshell by Eric Blossom's company, any of the secure phones. You basically pick up the phone, dial, push a button, and it establishes a Diffie-Hellman key and then encrypts the conversation. That's a real simple system. It has something we call perfect forward secrecy. When you hang up the phone, that key disappears. And even if the secret police grabs your phone afterwards and beats you to a pulp, they cannot recover the key. The key is gone forever. Now, attaching that to a key escrow system means that that key is now stored somewhere, in some database somewhere, and suddenly it's only as secure as the least trusted person who has access to it, or the least well-paid person who has access to it. Right. What was once a very simple security model is now a much more complex security model, and that's a lot harder. Right? We now have large databases of keys, attractive targets. We have many people having access to them. We have them around for some length of time. And this is really hard. Right? We believe that the massive scale of really any key escrow infrastructure is beyond the ability of us to do this securely. And there's a nice paper by the NSA, I think X3, which says basically the same things. And that paper's available on the web for those who need to talk to their government officials about it. So the next problem, I'm going to talk more about people problems. A lot of systems rely on user-generated and user-remembered secrets. This is actually bad. What we're seeing, and this is interesting to watch, 20 years ago, brute force dictionary attacks were hard to do. Now they're getting easier and easier. So what we're seeing is the technology is sort of chewing up from below what makes an acceptable password. Right? You can't use common names, you can't use anything in the dictionary. You know, when Mudge gives his talk, he might mention the kinds of stuff Loftcrack is doing on brute forcing Windows NT passwords. It's kind of amazing. So chomping from below, it's harder and harder to pick a good password, but there's a ceiling up on top by which users will not pick passwords better than this because they just can't remember them. It has to be 30 characters and, you know, non-alphanumeric and not make a word or a phrase. That's hard. I mean, that probably can't be done without writing it down. So if you look at something like PGP, one of the ways to attack PGP is to try to go after the passphrase, because most people choose really lousy passphrases. And there is a hacker tool out there which tries to brute force PGP passphrases. And I'm often surprised on how good it is. You'd think people would choose a complex sentence with numbers and punctuation that isn't particularly grammatical. But a lot of people don't. Right? The moral is users cannot remember good secrets. And if we're going to build systems that rely on them to remember good secrets, we're doing them a disservice. We're making a mistake. Sort of basic numbers. English has about 1.3 bits of entropy. So a 30-character English passphrase, is real English, is about a 40-bit key. Right, if you look at random passwords, probably about 4 bits of entropy. That's probably generous. So again, a 12-character password, it's about a 40-bit key. You need really big passwords. And there are some tricks you can do, but people need to do them. So similarly, a lot of systems rely on intelligent users. And this is a big mistake. Well, on the one hand, it's obvious, but it happens again and again. And you sort of see this in the great battle up and down the IP stack, right? We as security people want to push the security decisions way up into the application layer, because that's where there are users, right? It's your security, you decide. The users say, oh my God, I don't want that, and they try to push it way down in the transport layer. So we're fighting each other. And you sort of look at, browsers are a good example. You can set your browser in Netscape to security level low, medium, or high. For most users, that's the annoyance level, right? How many irritating alert messages will I get? And we can't expect users to do better. What's his name? Butler Lamson now works for Microsoft. He gives the great story of the average internet user surfing the web, and he clicks on some Java applet, and a warning message goes up and says, warning, the dancing pigs are an untrusted Java applet. They might do horrible things to your system. Do you want to continue? Yes, no. Well, the average user will pick dancing pigs over internet security every day. We can't rely on the users to make those decisions. Similarly, we can't rely on the users to verify certificates, which is what all PKI is based on now. You have to actually verify those certs. You can't just have them and pass them around. You've got to verify them occasionally. Users don't seem to do that. And the system really isn't there for them to do it. Right, we can't rely on users to follow security procedures, just like they'll take a chair and prop open a fire door, or take their password and give it to their secretary. In order to get their job done, they will go around security measures. And social engineering works really well. Most people are helpful. Right? The human nature is to be helpful. So good social engineering means you can get people's secrets. Right? The latest worm, or the Explorer zip worm, really nice idea. It used social engineering to get people to run it. It claimed to come from someone the user knew. It had the subject line of an email the user sent. It had a plausible body, and it had an executable that claimed to be a zip file, which if you're not looking very carefully is plausible. I think it even had the zip file icon. That's pretty impressive. And that was a dumb piece of social engineering. If you're actually good, you can do a lot better. So the real moral here is that cryptography works in the digital world. What are you doing now? Given a bucket of bits, I can secure that really well. But security is based on people, and that's a lot harder. And computers are tough because you don't know what they're actually doing. If you go to an application, you click sign, and you type your key in. You have no clue what you're signing. You believe you're signing what's on the screen. If the program is polite, that's what you're doing. But it doesn't have to be. So what you see isn't always what you get, and what you get isn't always what you want. And this is hard because the computer is insecure. You can't necessarily trust the software running on it. A little bit about the authentication infrastructure. I alluded to this before. Certificate PKIs are a big deal now, and there's a lot of problems with them as they exist today. They probably actually aren't doing very much good. I mean, really, most of what they are doing will be dealt with by the time we get secure DNS out there, if that ever happens. And actually, I can't figure out VeriSign's business model aside from that. But that's me. Anyway, trust is a complex social phenomenon, and you can't embody it in a single certificate. The right way to think of certificates are credentials. And if you open your wallet, you'll see many, many different certificates. You'll see bank cards, you'll see a driver's license, maybe a passport, right? The casino membership card, frequent flyer cards, library cards. Currency is effectively a bearer certificate. There's no reason in the world why the Venetian can't use an existing certificate instead of giving you its own card. Right? Technically, that's perfectly reasonable and maybe a good idea. But for business and for trust, that makes no sense. Which is why if you got yourself a slot card, you got a different card. And every casino will give you a different card. It will never be the same. So the sort of moral of this, the moral of the fact that you have all these certificates in your wallet, right, and they've never combined, right? There's no reason in the world why your frequent flyer number can't be your Visa number. I mean, they're both just pointers into databases. That's all they are, but they're not. That means there's really no such thing as a global authentication infrastructure. The closest we have are driver's licenses, because they're used for credentials in a number of different applications. But even that's very specific. You can't use your driver's license to get in the country. You need a passport. Heaven knows why. I mean, there's no reason why you shouldn't. So CAs are going to be different depending on the application. Whether we're doing a virtual driver's license, or more realistically, a virtual proof of age certificate, or a virtual credit card, or a virtual frequent shopper card. They're going to be different. And really one of the reasons is that if a third party produces a certificate, you need to solve the liability model. Visa will issue you its card, and if there's a problem, Visa has the liability. So Visa controls the issuance, use, and revocation of that card. Then they need to do that. And that's a big deal. Right. Some of the problems today is key verification is very rarely done. I don't know how, every time you use an SSL connection, you really should open up the who does this key belong to? Because all that little secure icon means is that you've gone secure with somebody. You have no idea with who. And to be secure, you want to know with who. If I'm in a dark room and there's someone there, and I know no one else can hear us, I'm not going to tell that person my secrets unless I know who that person is. Right, key revocation is very difficult and is not being done. The VeriSign root key is going to expire this year. I'm really curious to see what's going to happen because they have no plans in place to deal with this. My guess is nothing's going to happen and everyone will ignore it. But that's bad. Right? When root keys go bad, you should have a way to replace them.
Stand by for a voice. May I have your attention, please? We are conducting a test of the hotel's life safety system. The alarm you hear is part of this test. We apologize for any inconvenience. May I have your attention, please? We are conducting a test of the hotel's life safety system. The alarm you hear is part of this test. We apologize for any inconvenience.
The last bullet here is that authentication is not the same as authorization. And authorization is the hard part. If you get a secure email from someone and it's a purchase order for $1 million of computer equipment, you can verify the signature, you can verify the cert, you can verify that it's a valid email. What you really want to know is, should I accept this purchase order? And that second half, what is this key allowed to do? What are the authorizations associated with this key? That's a lot harder, and that's not really being done very much. Some companies are looking at this, but really you need to solve this from the bottom up. Might be it. Another one I see, a lot of these in commerce systems, reliance on global secrets. This seems dumb to me. I mean, if you're going to field a very large cable TV satellite decoding box and give it to 1 million users, or actually it's probably more than that, all throughout Europe, and you have it all based on one key with no mechanism to update the key if it's compromised, seems to me you're making a big mistake. But this happens surprisingly often, that there are these master keys. DivX is one of those examples, which, I don't know, might be good. It's tough. The company died before we all got a chance to whack on it. But if you think about it, if you have, Mondex probably has some of this, although I probably shouldn't say that out loud. This isn't being recorded, is it? Oh well. If you have a single secret that's diffuse in your system, it's only as secure as the least trusted person who's trusted to have it, or the least secure instance of it being stored somewhere. And in these systems, it's very difficult to be able to recover from a compromise. The question is not, is it secure, but when will it be compromised? And what do we do when that happens? So fare card systems for various public transportation, other good examples. And we need to be able, if we're going to have these large secrets, you need to be able to update them and recover. And better yet, you don't want large global secrets. Another problem we see this a lot in internet protocols, and these are version rollback attacks. And this is tough. On the internet, everything has to be backwards compatible, or you want it to be, because that's how we introduce incremental changes. In security, backwards compatibility is bad. If you have a protocol and you find it's insecure and you make a new one, having the new one backwards compatible to the old one is often a mistake. But we see this a lot in stuff on the internet, because the business case for making backwards compatible overrides the security case for not. I mean, there are some tricks you can do. SSL 3.0 is my favorite example of a protocol designed to be backwards compatible with 2.0, but is still secure. And they spent a lot of time and effort on that. That was hard to do. Again, back to commerce systems. Are we passing or failing the test? That's kind of what I want to know. There's a lot of stuff. Automation, which is sort of the friend of the internet, and the reason the internet works is it's all automated, is also the friend of an attacker. There are lots of attacks that are only possible because the system is automated. So the attack of stealing fractions of pennies out of interest-bearing accounts is a great attack that is only possible because you can automate it. That's a neat attack. If someone had an attack which could pickpocket someone that worked 1 out of every 10,000 attempts, that would be useless in the real world, but on the internet, that actually could be profitable. So the economies of scale means that attacks that used to fly below the radar suddenly are actually a problem. Similarly, automated attacks means you can push down the skill level. So I'll see a lot of companies talk about when some clever hacker exposes a really horrible security flaw, the company will say, wow, that's a really complex flaw. Only a brilliant person could ever exploit that. Well, that's true, but now that brilliant person has publicized it, and then someone else can write a script, and then some moron can run it. So on the internet, the people who exploit don't necessarily need the skill. Many things that come out of research can turn into exploits because you can automate them. And this is a big deal. Right? The failure characteristics are different. If you went to electronic commerce company A, let's say a regular commerce company, and said that we have a way to counterfeit your currency, that's a problem, but it's a manageable problem. Because the counterfeiting is difficult. It requires presses, it requires distribution. It's a big deal. There's only so much damage you can do. But if you can mint some sort of e-cash, you could post a program that does it. It can be the hands of 1,000 people overnight, 100,000 people in a week, 1 million people in 2 weeks. You could basically drop the currency. Because unlike a curve that looks like that for physical systems, you have amount of damage you can do that goes up exponentially. So the automation changes the failure characteristics of a system. I think I said that. A lot of systems have really poor failure modes. And this again is exploiting human nature. To me, the best way in the real world to eavesdrop on a secure telephone conversation, so again imagine the two parties have a secure phones and they're communicating, is to inject noise into their connection. You inject enough noise, the modems drop, they try again, you do it again, the modems drop, you do it a couple more times, they're going to get fed up saying this equipment doesn't work, they're going to talk in the clear. I mean, that's basic human nature. The desire to communicate really overrides the desire to be secure. And even in the military, where this is really important, you find lots of instances where when the crypto breaks, the people in the field, the military people in the field, will default to talking in the clear, will default to an insecure system, because you have to get the information out. So this is hard. What this really means is that denial of service attacks can be turned into actual information attacks. If you do a denial of service attack against someone's network, and they need to have the network up and running in order to do business, they're likely to pull down the security in order to get the network up, and then fix it later. Talked about this a little bit before, poor compromise recovery. A lot of systems spend enormous amount of times on prevention and not a lot of times on recovery. We know what the voice message is.
We are conducting a test of the hotel's life safety system. The alarm you hear is part of this test. We apologize for any inconvenience. May I have your attention, please? We are conducting a test of the hotel's life safety system. The alarm you hear is part of this test. Apologize for any inconvenience.
I recommend that everybody staying at the hotel complain bitterly. Actually, if you complain bitterly, you're likely to get a reduction in your room rate, because this is really obnoxious. They should do these at 2 in the morning when we're all asleep. They did? Wow. It didn't wake me up, so I guess the test was a failure. So I'm talking about compromise recovery. Any reasonable system has to look at what happens when we lose security. This out. I mean, this is going to destroy your speakers. Where was I? Oh yes, that's where I was. I assure you this is distracting for being up here. Probably down there too. Talking about compromise recovery, any system is going to fail somehow, some way. And it's important in designing them to figure out how to recover security from a failure mode. Right? It could be expensive. It could be, go out and replace hardware boards. It could be make everybody dial into this website and get a new download. Right? Recovery could be expensive, but at least should be thought about. And many companies I work for really never think about this. They say, we use triple DES, therefore we're secure. Well, what happens when something happens? One of the odd things about the cryptography business is that people can invent new mathematics to break your systems. So, if you think of it as a military technology, it has different characteristics than like a new gun or a new bomb. Because new principles can come up that can compromise your system and can go back in time. So if someone invents a new, anti-missile technology, it could make all of your missiles weaker. But if someone invents a new anti-cryptography technology, it has the ability to go back in time and make things that happened years ago less secure. And that's very different. So I like companies that think about this, that think about what it means to recover from compromise. Whether it is, their chief engineer going over to the dark side, or losing a piece of data, or there being someone actually maliciously attacking them, or a random error. Recovering from this is hard. And that's specific to the sort of the general problem of risk management. And I've talked about this a bunch, and most people don't do this. A lot of people think of security as binary. You're secure or you're insecure. And that's not really the way the world works. Lots of systems are out there that are sort of secure, marginally secure, secure up to a point. Right, if you think of the notary public system in this country, one of the most brain-dead security measures I've ever seen. But it's good enough for what it is. Credit cards, there's billions of dollars of fraud per year, yet it's secure enough to be very profitable. So similarly, internet systems are going to have these characteristics. Now, what is it that we're protecting against? The first speaker, whose just name blew out of my head, talked. I mean, that first slide, which we couldn't see because it was too big for the screen, had that profile of attackers, which is really good, going from foreign governments to terrorists, way down to annoying kids. In the middle are industrial competitors, the press. Who are the attackers? What are their characteristics? How much money are they going to throw at the problem? Are they willing to break the law? Or how much access do they have? Are there insiders involved? How much skill do they have? What are their motives? Is it a criminal attack, which is just trying to collect money? Or is it a publicity attack, where we don't like Microsoft, so we beat on them? Or is it some kind of legal attack, where there is a lawsuit going on, and someone's being hired as an expert witness to try to discredit the security of a system? In some ways, criminal attacks are the easiest, because it's like the joke that you don't have to outrun the bear, you just have to outrun the people you're with. As long as you're more secure than the next system, that's good enough. But if you're dealing with some kind of publicity-motivated attack, whether it's attacking U.S. government sites or attacking corporations, Monsanto, I believe Greenpeace has had their webpage defaced. Tobacco companies would worry about this. Attacks that are politically motivated, where good rate of return isn't an issue. That's a very different attacker profile. And if you're worried about a terrorist, for which driving a truck full of explosives into your computing center is a perfectly reasonable attack, that's yet a different set of risks we have to worry about. And one of the nice things I heard at the first talk this morning is the realization that a lot of these are blurring together, that a lot of the tools and techniques for the different types of threats are melding together. So it's important to think about this, right? Privacy violations, is that the motivation? Is the motivation to collect a database of, every widow 65 years or older with more than $1 million in the bank, who's given to more than a dozen charities in the past year and reads her horoscope every day? Right? That's a database we want for whatever reason. That's a very different sort of attack than, I don't like him and I want to get all of his stuff. Those kind of attacks have different characteristics, and they're going to be different defenses. So it's vital to understand the value of the data and how long it has to be valuable for. So some financial data, I was working with a company that was doing day trading, and what they said is, look, after 15 minutes, this stuff is public knowledge. We don't have secrets that last longer than 15 minutes. Most business data, a couple of years, unless it's really serious embarrassments. And those you want to be secure. I'm thinking of Bhopal and Union Carbide. That's something you'd want to hide for a long time. Or if you're an individual, embarrassments. Right? George Bush's college days. He wants those kept secret for probably his lifetime. So how long secrets have to be kept is important. Something that exacerbates this problem is the international nature of the net. So if you're it's a new person. It's sort of triple redundant. You get the notice to pay attention, The first message, and then the second message if you weren't paying attention. So I was talking about jurisdiction shopping, which is a big deal. If you're an internet criminal, you're likely to choose as your location a country that has bribable police forces, very lax computer crime laws, and no extradition treaties. Right? Because on the internet, there's no such thing as place. You can very easily choose your jurisdiction. And this lack of place has another characteristic. If you have to secure, let's say, a warehouse from break-in, you're going to secure yourself from the set of all burglars for whom it's worth the drive to go to your warehouse and try to break in. So all the burglars living in Guam are unlikely to attack a warehouse in Boise because it's too inconvenient. So there's going to be a fall-off in the number of criminals you have to worry about. On the net, because every place is adjacent to every other place, or I guess according to Chez's maps, there's a bunch of hops away, but every place is accessible very easily. Suddenly the locus of criminals you have to worry about is much, much larger. All right, so we know a voice message is coming.
May I have your attention, please? The alarm you just heard is a part of the hotel's early alert system. The reason for the alarm is now being investigated. We will keep you advised. Thank you.
And we didn't hear any alarms. That was the interesting thing. Right, but you think that would have been recorded? Are we done yet? I don't know what happened here. There we go. There we go. All right, so good systems will try to manage the relative risks of all of these different sorts of attacks and understand the characteristics of a internet payment system are very different than an anonymous web browsing system, that are going to be very different than a secure email system, that will be different than some kind of authentication system. And the security, it's almost hard to compare the two. So I think we're heading to the end of the list of bad things. Poor forensics. And there are actually a number of talks here on forensics, and I'm happy to see this. It's sort of a myth in this country that we prevent crime. And we actually don't. What we do is we detect crime after the fact. We collect a body of evidence that can be used to convince a neutral third party of the guilty party's guilt. We punish the guilty, and then we hope there's some sort of weird back channel that, to other people that prevents repetition. And that's the way things work, and they work pretty well that way. But we spend a lot more time on the net trying to prevent crime, and not enough time trying to detect crime, trying to collect evidence in some way that's acceptable to the current court system, and that can be used to prosecute the guilty. And I like seeing more of this. I think this is a big deal. This is how we're likely to solve a lot of the problems. Because basically, people can break into your house. They throw a rock through the window, or, if you don't have a burglar alarm, which most people don't. If you do have a burglar alarm, they just take a chainsaw and cut through the wall. That's actually happened in California. We do a lot of it. We do a lot of civic hygiene through detection and punishment. So I always like seeing forensics talks. And there are intrusion detection conferences going on now, and some of them are talking about collecting bodies of evidence. Because something we're learning is not enough just to have a disk with an audit log. You have to have some kind of secure evidentiary procedure, because otherwise the judges are going to say, well, I guess the opposing attorney, how do you know that hasn't been tampered with? And in fact, you don't. So I have 3 conclusion slides. I was actually hoping to have more time for questions, but the beeping sort of stopped that. First, I want to talk about the limits of perception. And this is a big deal for us. The problem with bad cryptography is that it looks exactly the same as good cryptography. I could hold up two products. They'll both be buzzword compliant. They'll use the same algorithms, the same protocols. They'll make the same claims. One is secure and one isn't. And you have no idea how to tell. Now, in our society, at least in this country, there are a number of ways we've dealt with this problem before. Now, one of the ways is government intervention, which is probably a mistake for the internet, but for things like aircraft safety, automobile safety, the Food and Drug Administration, the government has stepped in to be a consumer advocate when the consumer cannot make an intelligent buying decision. The internet's just moving too fast for that. If internet products had to be fielded at the rate of new prescription drugs, internet years would have a whole new meaning. The other way we've worked is the underwriter's laboratory approach, which is a private institution that attempts to verify the safety of electrical equipment. And again, for the internet, that doesn't seem to work at all. ICSA has attempted this, and they've sort of failed absolutely miserably. If there are any ICA people out there, I'm kind of sorry, but life's like that. This is hard. This is a very hard problem because we need expert testing, and yet the internet's moving so fast that we really can't get it in all but very limited areas. So we have to look at some of the other ways. And a lot of this using open systems, fixing things, dealing with detection and forensics. Second limit is the requirements. Right? Cryptography doesn't have to be perfect. We learn this again and again with existing systems. Ches is going to give a really nice talk tomorrow at lunch where he's going to talk about actually a lot of what I'm talking about for non-computer applications. Sort of, I've heard him do this, looking at security of different manual and different physical systems. You learn a lot, and one of the things you learn is if you've managed the risks, you can get by with an insecure system. For a lot of commerce systems, the last quote applies. A secure computer is one you've insured. If you've taken your risk and put a box around it and laid it off, you're done. You know the maximum amount of damage that can happen. And most existing systems permit some level of fraud. Right? There's always going to be some trade-off between security and usability. Again, credit cards are a great example of an industry that's learned to manage risk as opposed to demand absolute security. And the last one are the limits of technology. Right? Cryptography and to some extent computers are mathematical tools. Cryptography is essential for a secure system, but it does not automatically make a secure system. And a lot of people forget this. What we're learning again and again is that the social problems are much, much harder than the mathematics. And building a system that is secure in the real world is much, much harder than designing an algorithm or writing a paper describing a protocol. Because once you do it in the real world, you have all the real world constraints. Right? We've had burglar alarms go off, many times. Is there an attack against this hotel that involves setting off the burglar alarm? If there is, it's likely to work today. And that's actually very interesting. And the last quote, which is my sum-up quote, is an interesting quote. Let's see, Roger Morris Sr., who I guess he was chief scientist of the NSA before he retired. The last job I believe he had this job. Last job I say I knew he had was in charge of sabotage during the Gulf War, which sounds like the most fun job you can possibly have. I first heard this quote from him. He attributed it to Roger Needham, who is an old Cambridge University security guru from decades ago, who now heads Microsoft's laboratory in Cambridge. Roger Needham attributed this quote to Robert Morris Sr. So both of them have said it. Neither one will take credit for originating it. And I like it because it sums up what we're really doing here. What it says, I'll read it, is that if you think cryptography can solve your problem, then you don't understand your problem and you don't understand cryptography. And with that, I'll close, and I guess I have 5 minutes for questions. I was hoping for more. But I'll take questions not on topic, because usually I get up here and everyone wants to know all about crypto stuff. And I guess there's one hand up there.
I noticed that earlier on in your presentation, you said that...
May I have your attention, please? The alarm you heard has been investigated and resolved. We are announcing an all clear. May I have your attention, please? The alarm you heard has been investigated and resolved. We are announcing an all clear. We apologize for any inconvenience. Thank you.
I'll take the question.
My first question is that you said that proprietary algorithms were...
Please stand by for report. May I have your attention?
Why don't we stop now? Ask me that. Come up and ask me.
The alarm will hear